Ava Sterling had spent most of her life believing that wealth represented freedom. As one of Boston's most respected financial analysts, she had built her career through discipline rather than privilege, determined to prove that success earned through hard work carried more value than inherited luxury. She never expected that the inheritance she had avoided for years would become the very reason strangers began watching her every move before she had even signed a single legal document. Long before she touched $1 of the Sterling fortune, death had already begun following her shadow. The news arrived on an ordinary winter morning. Ava learned that her estranged grandfather, billionaire industrialist Edward Sterling, had died unexpectedly inside his private Swiss residence. Their relationship had fractured decades earlier after a bitter family dispute, leaving Ava convinced she had been permanently erased from the powerful Sterling dynasty. She assumed his enormous estate would pass to distant relatives or corporate trustees. Instead, an international law firm delivered an invitation that changed everything. Within days, Ava boarded a flight to Switzerland accompanied by her fiancé, Nathan Cross. Nathan appeared calm and reassuring throughout the journey, offering confidence whenever uncertainty crept into Ava's thoughts. He believed attending the legal proceedings together would provide emotional support during what promised to be an overwhelming experience. His steady presence helped quiet the growing unease that neither of them could fully explain. Hidden deep within the Swiss Alps stood the Sterling estate, an architectural masterpiece untouched by time. Towering snow-covered peaks surrounded the secluded property like silent guardians. Crystal-clear frozen lakes reflected the pale winter sky, while dense pine forests stretched endlessly across the mountainside. The centuries-old manor combined old-world stone craftsmanship with modern luxury, creating a place that looked more like a forgotten royal palace than a private family residence. Every hallway displayed priceless paintings, antique sculptures, and portraits of generations whose expressions seemed to follow every visitor passing beneath them. The estate's senior attorneys welcomed Ava with remarkable formality before revealing the first unimaginable truth. Edward Sterling had rewritten every previous version of his will only weeks before his death. Against every expectation, Ava had become the sole legal heir to the Sterling dynasty, inheriting a fortune worth billions along with countless international assets, historic properties, and controlling shares in several global corporations. Yet the announcement carried an unsettling warning. Every individual who had previously inherited control of the Sterling fortune had died under mysterious circumstances before enjoying their inheritance for long. Official investigations had always produced ordinary explanations, but the disturbing pattern remained impossible to ignore. Even the experienced attorneys struggled to disguise their discomfort while acknowledging the family's tragic history. As legal assistants carefully arranged dozens of confidential files across an enormous oak conference table, Ava noticed something unexpected. Nathan's attention drifted almost entirely toward the paperwork, rather than the emotional weight resting on her shoulders. His curiosity centered on sealed folders, security stamps, and legal restrictions instead of comforting the woman he claimed to love. The subtle change lasted only moments, yet it planted the first quiet seed of doubt. Finally, the lead attorney placed one weathered envelope before Ava. Thick red wax still protected its century-old seal. Across its surface appeared a handwritten sentence that seemed less like legal instruction and more like a warning left for the future. The greatest danger is never the fortune. It is the clause hidden beneath it. As silence settled over the room, the lawyers unlocked an antique steel case and prepared to reveal a document that had remained sealed for almost 100 years. The century-old document revealed a condition so disturbing that it transformed Edward Sterling's fortune from a blessing into a calculated test of survival. Every previous heir had either vanished or died before completing its requirements, leaving the Sterling dynasty surrounded by whispers of betrayal instead of prosperity. The lead attorney carefully unfolded the brittle pages and explained the origin of the Sterling family trust. Created nearly 100 years earlier by the dynasty's founder after a series of violent inheritance disputes, the trust was designed to preserve both the family's wealth and its leadership. Hidden within its legal language was a confidential provision known only to a handful of trustees, the preservation clause. According to the clause, the individual named as sole heir would not gain unrestricted ownership immediately. Instead, the inheritance would remain under strict protection for 1 full year. During that period, the heir was required to remain alive while completing a series of confidential legal obligations. If the heir died before the 12 months expired, the entire fortune would automatically transfer to another beneficiary selected through an encrypted succession protocol known only to the trustees. On paper, the clause appeared to safeguard the family empire. In reality, it created a dangerous incentive. Anyone who believed they might become the next beneficiary suddenly had a reason to hope the current heir never survived the year. Greed quietly replaced loyalty, turning relatives, business partners, and trusted companions into potential threats. The sterling fortune did not simply reward success, it tempted betrayal. Nathan Cross reacted with remarkable intensity. Rather than expressing concern for Ava's safety, he repeatedly questioned the attorneys about the legal wording, transfer procedures, and succession mechanisms. His interest seemed unusually focused on technical details instead of the risks surrounding the woman he intended to marry. Ava tried to dismiss the feeling, yet his curiosity lingered in her thoughts long after the meeting ended. Over the following days, the peaceful mountain estate became increasingly unsettling. A heavy chandelier crashed into an empty hallway only minutes after Ava had walked through it. The brakes on an antique vehicle failed during a routine inspection. A narrow path overlooking a frozen lake suddenly collapsed beneath fresh snowfall. Each incident was dismissed as coincidence, but together they formed a pattern too precise to ignore. Amid the growing tension, the estate's security chief, Victor Hale, quietly entered Ava's life. Calm, disciplined, and difficult to read, Victor rarely spoke more than necessary. His sharp eyes constantly observed the people around him, as though he expected danger to emerge from within the mansion rather than outside its walls. Soon afterward, Ava noticed discreet surveillance cameras installed throughout corridors that had appeared empty only days before. No one admitted authorizing them. Then, during one sleepless night, she returned to her bedroom and found unmistakable signs that someone had searched through her belongings with professional care. The following morning, an even darker discovery awaited her. Every confidential page of the inheritance contract had been secretly copied, meaning someone inside the Sterling estate now possessed the complete contents of the preservation clause. The greatest betrayal was not hidden inside the century-old contract. It was standing beside Ava every day, wearing the familiar face of the man she trusted enough to marry. Long before Nathan Cross proposed, he had already begun studying the sterling fortune as though it were the true love of his life. The copied inheritance documents forced Ava to question everyone inside the estate. She tried convincing herself that Nathan could not possibly be involved, yet small details she had ignored for years suddenly returned with unsettling clarity. His career had always appeared successful, but he rarely discussed his finances in detail. Whenever conversations turned toward investments or long-term assets, he redirected them with effortless charm. While organizing files in one of the manor's private offices, Ava accidentally opened a secure laptop that had been left unlocked for only a few moments. Among ordinary business correspondence, she discovered a folder containing heavily encrypted emails exchanged with several international investment organizations. Most of the messages were unreadable, but recurring references to Project Sterling, succession timing, and asset activation immediately caught her attention. Before she could investigate further, the computer automatically locked itself, erasing any chance of reading more. The discovery left her unsettled. She shared nothing with Nathan, choosing instead to quietly observe his behavior. At the same time, Victor Hale appeared to increase his silent protection. Without offering explanations, he assigned discreet security personnel to monitor Ava's movements and subtly changed travel routes whenever she left the estate. He never accused anyone directly, but every precaution suggested he expected another attempt on her safety. Seeking relief from the growing pressure, Ava joined a guided walk through the breathtaking alpine forests surrounding the manor. Towering pine trees framed narrow mountain trails, while crystal streams flowed beneath wooden bridges surrounded by wildflowers and ancient stone paths. For a brief moment, the peaceful landscape seemed untouched by greed or suspicion. That illusion vanished when part of a wooden observation platform suddenly collapsed beneath Ava's feet. She managed to regain her balance before falling into a steep rocky ravine. The damaged supports showed signs of deliberate tampering rather than natural decay. Within moments, Nathan appeared at the scene, arriving so quickly that his timing felt almost impossible. It was not the first time he had appeared immediately after a dangerous incident, and Ava could no longer dismiss the pattern as coincidence. Victor later uncovered another disturbing detail during a routine background review. Months before Edward Sterling's death became public knowledge, Nathan had quietly hired private investigators to collect information about the Sterling family, its corporate holdings, and its surviving descendants. The investigation had begun years before his engagement to Ava, raising questions no reasonable explanation could answer. As tensions continued rising, another security breach struck the estate. Someone broke into the restricted archive room and stole confidential Sterling family records containing decades of private history. The missing files appeared carefully selected rather than randomly taken, suggesting the thief knew exactly what they were searching for. While examining old inventory records, Ava discovered a forgotten photograph hidden between two archive folders. The faded image showed several visitors standing outside the Sterling Manor during a charity gala held 5 years earlier. Among them stood Nathan Cross, smiling confidently at the entrance of the estate years before he had supposedly met Ava Sterling for the very first time. The Sterling fortune had never truly rested inside banks or investment portfolios. Hidden beneath the snow-covered mountains was a secret far more valuable than billions of dollars. A collection of knowledge so powerful that generations had been willing to betray, disappear, and kill to possess it. Shaken by the photograph proving Nathan had visited the estate years before meeting her, Ava became determined to uncover every secret her grandfather had left behind. While examining old architectural blueprints stored inside the manor's library, she noticed several corridors that did not appear anywhere on the estate's official maps. The forgotten passages led toward the oldest wing of the mansion, where a concealed stone staircase descended deep beneath the mountain. Accompanied only by Victor Hale, Ava entered a network of ancient tunnels carved directly into solid rock. The air grew colder with every step, and rusted steel doors marked with faded military symbols hinted that these chambers had served a purpose far beyond protecting family wealth. After navigating a maze of reinforced corridors, they arrived before an enormous blast-proof vault constructed during the Second World War. Inside, the scale of the hidden collection surpassed anything Ava had imagined. Stacked gold reserves occupied reinforced storage chambers, while priceless paintings, rare sculptures, and historical artifacts filled climate-controlled galleries. Yet Victor quickly pointed out that the precious metals represented only a fraction of the Sterling legacy. Locked inside armored cabinets were confidential government files, diplomatic correspondence, intelligence reports, corporate acquisition records, and decades of classified agreements involving influential figures across multiple countries. At that moment, Ava understood the terrifying truth. The Sterling fortune was not measured by money alone. Its greatest value lay in information capable of protecting reputations, exposing corruption, influencing global markets, and destroying powerful people with a single document. Whoever controlled the vault controlled far more than wealth. Victor's inspection uncovered fresh evidence that shattered any illusion of security. Fine scratches surrounded one of the electronic access panels, recent boot marks covered the dusty floor, and a broken security seal indicated that someone had entered the vault only days earlier. The intruder had known exactly where to go and had left almost no trace behind. As they returned to the surface, the estate descended into quiet chaos. Surveillance systems began shutting down without warning, electronic locks failed randomly, and power fluctuations affected only restricted areas of the manor. At the same time, Nathan developed a strange routine of disappearing every night, always returning before dawn with vague explanations that satisfied no one. Fresh snowfall soon revealed another unsettling clue. Distinct footprints crossed the grounds toward a section of forest that concealed one of the underground tunnel entrances. The tracks belonged to several individuals rather than a single visitor, suggesting organized activity instead of isolated trespassing. The growing evidence forced Ava to confront an unavoidable conclusion. Nathan was no longer the only mystery surrounding the estate. Multiple groups had independently learned of the hidden vault, and each appeared willing to risk everything to reach its secrets before anyone else. Returning to the underground chamber for a closer inspection, Ava discovered one final object resting alone upon an iron pedestal. It was a weathered envelope sealed with the Sterling family crest, untouched by time. Across its surface, a handwritten instruction waited in faded black ink. Open only after discovering the traitor. The greatest lie surrounding the Sterling dynasty was not that its bloodline had vanished. The truth was far more unsettling. The family had survived for generations by abandoning their names, hiding behind carefully crafted identities, and quietly waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim the fortune. The mysterious envelope inside the underground vault directed Ava toward a collection of sealed genealogical records stored in another secured chamber. Together with Victor Hale, she examined decades of handwritten family registries, coded journals, and confidential correspondence. The documents revealed an astonishing strategy that had protected the Sterling Empire through wars, political upheaval, and corporate battles. Whenever conflicts over the inheritance became too dangerous, selected family members officially staged their own deaths. New identities were quietly established across Europe, allowing descendants to disappear from public records while secretly remaining connected to the Sterling network. Entire branches of the family had continued living prosperous lives under different surnames, preserving both their wealth and influence without attracting unwanted attention. The discovery explained why so many heirs had seemingly disappeared from history. According to Victor, many of them had not been murdered at all. They had been manipulated into abandoning their identities through deception, coercion, or carefully orchestrated legal schemes. The myth of a cursed inheritance had served as an effective shield, discouraging outsiders from investigating the truth while keeping rival heirs suspicious of one another. Within days, elegant luxury vehicles began arriving at the mountain estate. Distinguished businessmen, philanthropists, art collectors, and influential socialites introduced themselves as distant relatives who had suddenly developed an interest in Edward Sterling's final wishes. Although each visitor displayed polished manners and impeccable credentials, Ava sensed that every smile concealed private ambition. None appeared motivated by grief. They had come for control. Meanwhile, Victor quietly informed Ava that Nathan had left the estate on several evenings without notifying security. Following one of those unexplained departures, surveillance teams observed him meeting privately with an unidentified older man in a secluded alpine village nestled between frozen lakes and snow-covered peaks. The peaceful mountain community looked like a winter postcard, yet beneath its beauty another layer of the Sterling mystery was unfolding beyond Ava's reach. Determined to uncover the truth herself, Ava continued searching through the vault's hidden archives. Among forgotten ledgers, she discovered a collection of original birth certificates, adoption records, and confidential hospital documents that had never been entered into any public registry. Many names matched those of respected European families who had never acknowledged any connection to the Sterling dynasty. The carefully concealed records exposed decades of rewritten family histories, proving that the Sterling bloodline had quietly spread across multiple countries while remaining invisible to the outside world. Every false identity, staged death, and fabricated document had served one purpose: preserving the dynasty until the right heir emerged. As Victor compared the newly discovered birth records with confidential genetic files recovered from the vault, one final result appeared on the screen. The analysis erased the last remaining doubt surrounding Nathan Cross. The DNA records confirmed that Nathan was not an outsider who had stumbled into the Sterling fortune. He carried Sterling blood himself. The Sterling inheritance had never been created to make its next heir unimaginably wealthy. Its true purpose was far more calculated. Nearly a century earlier, the founder of the Sterling Trust had predicted that greed would one day consume the family from within, and the inheritance itself had been transformed into a carefully engineered trap designed to expose the dynasty's final enemy. The DNA report forced Ava to rethink everything she believed about the Sterling legacy. Nathan's hidden bloodline explained his unusual interest in the family fortune, but it also raised a more troubling question. If the trust's architects had anticipated betrayal decades in advance, then every legal clause, sealed document, and hidden vault had been placed exactly where they were meant to be. The inheritance was not simply a transfer of wealth. It was an investigation that unfolded one clue at a time, forcing the guilty to reveal themselves. Nathan's behavior grew increasingly erratic. His calm confidence disappeared, replaced by restless movements and frequent private phone calls that ended the moment anyone approached. He spent long hours wandering restricted areas of the estate, searching for something only he seemed to understand. Meanwhile, Victor uncovered a network of concealed financial transfers linked to offshore accounts that had quietly moved millions of dollars through shell corporations over several years. The transactions pointed toward a coordinated operation rather than ordinary fraud, suggesting that someone had been preparing for control of the Sterling Empire long before Edward Sterling's death. Before the evidence could be fully examined, another deadly incident struck. During a routine inspection of one of the estate's mountain overlooks, a reinforced safety railing suddenly gave way beneath Ava. She managed to escape serious injury only because Victor reacted instantly, pulling her away moments before the structure collapsed into the frozen valley below. The damage showed unmistakable signs of deliberate sabotage. Back inside the manor, Ava discovered a hidden compartment beneath the library floor containing several encrypted journals written by Edward Sterling himself. Although much of the writing remained encoded, repeated references to family surveillance, loyalty tests, and secret investigations confirmed that the old billionaire had documented decades of deception. Victor restored recordings recovered from hidden cameras concealed throughout the estate. The footage revealed unexpected meetings between several newly arrived relatives, estate employees, and unknown visitors entering restricted corridors under the cover of darkness. Alliances shifted rapidly as long-buried betrayals surfaced, making it impossible to identify who was manipulating whom. As tensions reached their peak, a violent snowstorm swept across the Swiss Alps. Roads disappeared beneath heavy snowfall, communication lines failed, and every route leading away from the estate became impassable. The mountain fortress had become a prison where every suspect remained trapped together. While carefully decoding the final pages of Edward Sterling's journals, Ava uncovered one last revelation that surpassed every previous discovery. Nathan's name had been recorded inside confidential Sterling family records decades before Ava Sterling was even born. The Sterling fortune had never been the ultimate prize. It was bait, carefully placed decades earlier to lure every ambitious conspirator into revealing their true intentions. By the time anyone realized the trap existed, escape had already become impossible. The shocking discovery inside Edward Sterling's journals gave Ava precise instructions to follow if the family's darkest secret was ever uncovered. Hidden within the final coded pages was a sequence of legal authorizations that could only be activated by the rightful heir. Trusting her grandfather's plan, Ava completed every required step exactly as described, unaware that the true operation had been waiting for this moment for generations. Within hours, the Sterling Empire reacted automatically. Corporate control systems locked down, private trust accounts were frozen, and ownership transfers across dozens of international companies were suspended. Every financial pathway connected to the inheritance suddenly became inaccessible. Anyone attempting to move Sterling assets unknowingly triggered a silent chain of alerts buried inside the trust decades earlier. Those alerts reached more than the estate itself. International financial investigators, regulatory agencies, and specialized legal authorities had secretly monitored the Sterling Trust under confidential agreements established long before Edward Sterling's death. Without public announcements or dramatic arrests, investigators quietly began tracking every individual connected to suspicious transactions surrounding the inheritance. Inside the isolated manor, Nathan interpreted the confusion very differently. Believing the frozen accounts represented temporary administrative delays, he became convinced that control of the Sterling Empire was finally within his reach. His confidence returned as he secretly coordinated with several hidden allies, unaware that every move was now being documented. Victor Hale chose that moment to launch the final phase of Edward Sterling's plan. Working alongside trusted members of the estate's security team, he discreetly sealed escape routes, secured confidential archives, and collected the remaining evidence without confronting anyone directly. Every suspect remained under constant observation while believing they still controlled the situation. The pressure inside the mansion shattered long-standing alliances. Relatives who had spent years protecting one another suddenly turned against former partners. Hidden financial agreements, forged identities, and carefully concealed betrayals surfaced one after another. As every layer of deception collapsed, one influential family member emerged as the central figure coordinating decades of manipulation from behind respectable public identities. The evidence left little room for doubt. The true mastermind had exploited the preservation clause, fabricated rivalries, manipulated heirs, and engineered countless betrayals while remaining invisible behind layers of trusted intermediaries. Everything that had happened since Ava inherited the fortune had unfolded exactly as Edward Sterling predicted. Yet as Victor prepared the final collection of evidence, one last confidential document surfaced among the trust records. Its contents transformed the entire investigation once again. Despite every suspicious action and every carefully hidden secret, Nathan Cross had never been the architect of the conspiracy. He had been playing a dangerous role inside a plan designed by someone far more powerful. The Sterling fortune survived another generation, but Ava finally understood the lesson her grandfather had spent a lifetime trying to protect. Some inheritances demanded far more than signatures and legal ownership. They demanded the courage to survive the greed they awakened in others. The final document identified the true architect of the conspiracy. It was not Nathan Cross, nor any of the ambitious relatives who had competed for control of the estate. The mastermind was Charles Ashford, the Sterling Trust's longtime legal advisor and chief trustee. For over 3 decades, Charles had quietly manipulated succession records, encouraged rivalry among family branches, and carefully exploited every heir's fear. By controlling information instead of money, he had transformed himself into the invisible ruler of the Sterling Empire while allowing others to take the blame for every tragedy. Edward Sterling had discovered Charles's deception years earlier, but lacked enough evidence to expose him publicly. Instead, he redesigned the inheritance process into one final investigation. The infamous preservation clause, often whispered about as the kill clause, had never been written to encourage murder. Its true purpose was to delay absolute control of the fortune long enough for hidden evidence to surface and for every conspirator to reveal their intentions. The clause did not create greed. It simply exposed those already consumed by it. As Victor delivered the complete collection of financial records, surveillance footage, encrypted journals, and DNA evidence to international investigators, the remaining conspirators rapidly lost their influence. Frozen assets were permanently seized, fraudulent identities were dismantled, and decades of carefully hidden corruption collapsed under overwhelming proof. Charles Ashford's carefully constructed empire of manipulation finally came to an end. Nathan's own ambitions disappeared with it. Although his Sterling ancestry proved genuine, every attempt he had made to position himself closer to the inheritance had ultimately served Charles's larger plan. His obsession with the fortune had blinded him to the fact that he, too, had been manipulated from the beginning. The future he imagined vanished as the investigation reached its conclusion. Only then did Victor reveal the final secret Edward Sterling had entrusted to him. He was not merely the estate's security chief. Years earlier, Edward had appointed Victor as the independent guardian of the Sterling Trust, responsible for protecting the rightful heir until the conspiracy reached its inevitable end. His quiet vigilance had never been an accident. It had been the final safeguard built into the dynasty. With the truth finally uncovered, Ava legally secured the Sterling inheritance and chose a path completely different from those who came before her. Rather than allowing the fortune to remain a symbol of fear and division, she restructured the family empire into charitable foundations, educational programs, and international research initiatives dedicated to creating opportunities instead of conflict. As the first rays of sunlight spread across the snow-covered peaks of the Swiss Alps, the frozen lakes reflected a peaceful golden glow unlike anything the estate had witnessed in generations. For the first time, silence replaced suspicion. Ava understood that wealth had never been the curse haunting the Sterling family. Money had simply revealed the character of everyone who reached for it. Trust had been betrayed, loyalty had been tested, and survival had demanded painful sacrifices. But the dynasty's greatest enemy had never been hidden clauses or secret vaults. It had always been human greed. And with that truth finally exposed, the Sterling legacy entered a future no longer defined by fear, but by wisdom earned through survival.